So what I wanted to do, welcome to our new facility. This is the Faculty of Business for Athabasca University. We have two locations that we operate from. This is our head office, our newest location. So we're really thrilled to have you here. And I mean, we're not quite all settled. As you can see, the whiteboards aren't up and the projector isn't installed, but we're really excited to be here. And as you know, in any major move, the kinds of machinations and the different little details that you have to take care of along the way really is the metaphor of the day. So forgive me if I keep coming back to moving from A to B, because it's still very much in my reality. What I wanted to do is just set the tone here. I've been asked to talk about research. I've been asked to talk about ideas. And in order to set the tone, I think that you need some, as any true academic would say, definitions. What is it that we mean when we're talking about inclusive workplaces? What are the different factors that you need to sort of take into account as you do your discussions today, as you explore the journey of moving from one state of organization to another? And so my favorite topics, as you can see on the screen, I want to talk a little bit about diversity, as well as what it means to be included. I'll talk a little bit about culture. Now, everybody knows what culture is, but no one knows what culture is. It's one of those concepts that is very, very difficult to get our heads around. And then following that, there's two very key aspects, and that has to do with how we actually engage in change management, to move from one state of being to another. And underscoring everything is the leadership journey. So leading the way is kind of where my heart is. And I would like to just sort of briefly, ever so briefly, I've only been given a few minutes, to sort of touch on these things, so that as you go through your discussions today, you can reflect on some of the ideas and bring them forward. And hopefully, in doing that, have a more meaningful conversation. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Great. So, new computer. Rosabeth Moss-Kanter, Barry Stein, they're very provocative theorists in the 70s, early 80s. They talked about the theory of being different. When you are one of the many versus one of the few. Their little provocative book was called The Tale of O, being different in organizations. And I thought it was really instructive to actually borrow some of their ideas. When you think about being one of the many, you're an X. Or when you think about being one of the few as an O. And right away, you start to notice things about these X's and O's. And they use this very deliberately as to not make any attributions, whether it is different factors surrounding gender or race or whatever. They wanted to give you an illustration in a very basic way. They talk about the O, because what do you notice when you look at this little depiction here? Your eyes go straight to the O, right? The thing that stands out, that's unique. And what that does to the O is it creates a sense of, I'm in the spotlight. Everybody's noticing what I'm doing because I'm different. They're on a tightrope or they're in the spotlight, but there's a sense that there's an O here, and we're noticing that person. And what do you notice when you look at this depiction? Your eye goes straight to the place where there's something different, right? And again, over here, you see clusters of people. Even when there's a few more O's, you see that sort of pattern. And so what Kanter and Stein talked about was the onus that the people realized in terms of being different. They talked about how people coped with those that are different. They talked about the attributions of stereotypical roles because of discomfort. And some of their language, it is old, but they thought that you couldn't be a full member of the group unless you were given some sort of a label, a role to play. You could be a helper, you could be a cheerleader, you could be like a mascot, you could be what they refer to as the Iron Maiden. Of course, that was one of my favorites, and so on. And there was this notion that you couldn't be a full member because you were an O. You were a different person. So you had to somehow make everybody else comfortable with your onus by being assigned to one of these roles. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to depict it. And then of course you note that early on we all tried to define what is diversity. We moved from the employment equity, the Abella Commission, where we talked about equity versus equality, and then it morphed into let's talk about diversity because it's more inclusive. And we talked about different social categories of that. So we had people who could be primarily defined in diverse ways based on primary characteristics such as race, gender, age. And then we went into secondary characteristics, which talked about other aspects of the individual's background. Of course, now we're even more complex. We're talking about the work characteristics, the different kinds of professional characteristics, the different kinds of educational background, the complexities upon complexities that is realized in terms of the different work organizations. And so diversity starts to become so pluralistic, so complex, that it's very difficult, once again, to understand what it is. So we can talk about these at the end. So then we come to this notion of organization culture. And this is your fast trip down the theoretical road. But culture is even more difficult to define than diversity, because we all know what it is. Some people will talk about the culture as rooted in language and food, or the difference that you experience when you travel to different countries, or realize different ethnicity, whatever it might be. But cultures also incorporate what happens in an organization. What is the way time is being dealt with? How do we interact with one another? What are the rules of behavior? What are the rules of engagement? And how does that differ depending on where you are in the organization, hierarchically speaking, or in terms of the discipline that you're working within? So we often hear about culture as the way we do things around here. That is the sort of common definition. But we also hear about culture in other ways. And there's a lot of work. You can take a course in just culture, or even maybe a whole program. I know Angela and I talk a lot about different aspects of culture. So early definitions wanted to give you a sense of what is it about social life in organizations. What can we supplement the economic theories to actually get a grip on what it is, what it means to be in that organization, how it is to live in that organization, to feel the different rules and ways of being. And Peters and Waterman did a lot of work. They studied places like McDonald's and Disneyland and excellent companies. And they wanted to really discern what is it that we think about when we think about culture. And they picked apart things like specialized language, rites and rituals, ceremonies and different things. And so you can just imagine, I always try to think about the university and Disney World and the same kind of comparison. Anyway, never mind. Not sure who's Mickey Mouse, but anyway. We have our ceremonies, rites, and rituals with graduation, with examination. We have our rites of passage. We have our specialized language. If you're in the finance course, you're going to have a specialized language. If you're in the marketing course, or if you're taking my course, leadership, you're going to have a way of being in that organization. And so they did the whole series of study of culture. And then we have other authors like Berger and Luckman years ago who thought that culture was a social construction of reality, and that in every single interaction we are constructing and reconstructing a reality, which makes it kind of shift and change constantly if you're going to be reconstructing it every time you have a different conversation, right? So my conversation with you will be completely creating a different reality than if I go outside and start talking to one of my staff, which is true, but it's still me. And what is it that's rooted in that culture, that diversity that I bring, that is unique? And so we talk about values, ideas, assumptions. We talk about what is rooting us to the particular phenomenon. And then we talk about what does that mean in terms of inclusive workplaces. So I know you don't need another definition, but I would be remiss if I didn't share the one that I made up. So I'll just leave that with you. Culture is nested in every layer, creating layers around it like a concentric circle. It is understood within a nested concept and shared meaning, so social construction of reality. It's taken for granted, it evolves, and it is carried through different mechanisms. And we won't dwell on that, but it is a sense that it's very difficult to really get a hold of until you start looking and peeling back layers of the onion. And that, coupled with what we just talked about with respect to understanding diversity and what we are looking at in work organizations, makes it a study worth a lot of your time. So, almost done. Why is change so darn difficult then? We're talking about a lot of things that's, if we're going to be inclusive, if we're going to actually take diversity and culture and all of these things into account, we're asking you to change something. And why is it so difficult for people to accept that? Of course, we all know it's important. We wouldn't be here and trying to talk to each other and figure out what to do next if you didn't believe it is important. But we have to understand why people are so vested in the status quo, and what is it that's making them resist change. Because we have to know who's the winner and who's the loser in any change. What is happening is that some things are going to benefit others, some things are going to be costs. So the pros and cons of change. And so there's a lot of different layers to this. In order for you to do one thing, you may have to give up something else. So think about the pros and the cons. Who's the winner? Who's the loser? Or plural. And then what's happening to sabotage the change? One of my favorite concepts, and I want to share it with you, is the contrepreneur. The individual that may agree with what you're saying in the meeting, but as soon as you are outside, they're trying to find ways to sabotage you. That won't work. We need more analysis. Paralysis by analysis. Anyone heard of that one? Mm-hmm. Oh, that won't work because we need to do this, this, and this before we do that. Swamp the change. Oh, I agree with you, but thousands wouldn't. I will just try to go along with what you're saying, and then as soon as you fail, told you so. The contrepreneur is a very crafty beast. and it's one that we all deal with. And so I want you to keep that person or those persons in mind as we look at it. So other sources of resistance, this is a special kind of resistance, is the contrepreneur. But also what is rooted in who's winning and who's losing. We're talking about something about the psychological employment contract too. That's not what I bought in for. I came in as an X. I know what the career trajectory looks like. I bought into this. I gave 30 years of my life to this. And now you're telling me I have to step aside and let this whippersnapper come in and do everything before they're ready? That's not what I bought in for. So there's lots of different ways to think about resistance, think about what it is we want to change, think about the diversity that we're trying to encourage, think about the cultural values that we hold. And then, if that's not enough for an early morning, think about the leadership. Leadership is not only a position. It's a process. It's something that we all engage in every single day. It's not the C-suite, the right of the few X's or whatever it is at the top. It's something we all are responsible for. So I wanted to give you some of my thoughts around leadership, and then I'll open it up for questions, and then we can move on because I know I'm probably running out of time already. But when you are a leader, which all of you clearly are, you have to know who you are. You have the emotional intelligence to understand yourself, to understand others, to try to figure out the onus of those people. You are an excellent communicator in various media. Today we have to be not only a good communicator in a face-to-face setting, but also in a distributed setting. Increasingly, we're doing all of our work online. We even, I'm in the same office as someone, I will email instead of walk down the hall because I'm fitting it in between the cracks, or I'm on a boring conference call or listening to a meeting. And I'm also multitasking, and I'm getting people organized for something else. And I know it's maybe not focusing on the thing of importance at the moment, but for me, it really helps to actually be able to do that. So communication, peer coaching, huge. How we develop, how we prepare, how we support one another. You learn how to coach. You're not only a mentor these days, you have to coach. You have to ask those difficult questions and support and encourage and prepare. Creativity, figuring out the next big thing. That's a really exciting thing to do, but it's also very, very responsible in terms of how you do it. Problem solving and managing stress. So as a leader, there's a lot of skills that you're bringing to this as well. Then you need to focus on the follower, the teams, the diversity, the style stretching. We've heard about situational leadership and the different things that we have to bring to bear on different situations, different scenarios, whatever. And finally, it is the situation you find yourself in, the culture that we've just talked about. The culture here is quite different probably from the culture in your own organizations. The culture in Edmonton North is quite different from it is in Athabasca. But we're always trying to understand and incorporate and include. Accountability, I can't even underline that one enough. To be responsible, accountable, to live your values, and to be inclusive. So what it is in a leadership process is all of those things. It is the ability to mobilize others to struggle for shared aspiration. It's not one demigod trying to be the boss of everyone. It's about managing that process. So before I leave you, there's just a few 5 exemplary practices that I want you to remember. Model the way. create a shared vision. Challenge the process. It doesn't have to be because it's the process that's been there for 50 years that's the way we have to do it. Let's challenge it. Let's figure out a better way. Enable others to act. Support, encourage, enable. These are the words that we're trying to bring forward. And finally, encourage the heart. So, I've said a lot in a short time, I think. And all of this is intended to give you a sense of a framework, but it's also research-driven. It's also based on a lot of work that has gone on before. And any questions?